3 ways to spot the abuser in couples counseling. My name is Jared Mello, the wizard of radical self-respect and the shepherd of black sheep. First, let me say, I do not recommend going to couples counseling with an abusive person ever. Because abuse is not a communication issue, it is an abuse issue. And the only person that can work on that is the abusive person themselves. Also, for therapists to note, many narcissists, especially covert narcissists, can appear like they are collaborating in the actual session. They can try to act like they're going to be the perfect client because they want the therapist's validation. And often these narcissists will try to make friends with the therapist by being charismatic and charming, but they're really trying to recruit the therapist to their side and convince them that the narcissist is the victim and you are the bad guy. Also, many narcissists will weaponize what they hear in therapy against you. If you open up about your vulnerabilities, insecurities, or weaknesses, the narcissist is very likely to throw them in your face later and use them against you. Also, many narcissists will triangulate you with the therapist. For all of those reasons and more, I do not recommend anyone goes to couples counseling with an abusive person. Unfortunately, it does still happen, and people waste a lot of time going and nothing ever changes, and if anything, it gets worse. And unfortunately, a lot of couples counselors, they don't see the dynamic. And that's one of the reasons I am making this video. And if you suspect you're with an abusive person, the answer is to make a plan to leave that situation safely, because leaving an abusive person is a very dangerous situation a lot of times. Make a plan and notify friends, family, maybe even law enforcement. But with that being said, sometimes people still do wind up in couples counseling with an abusive person because they don't realize what they're dealing with. And if you're a therapist listening to this, keep this in mind. Everything a narcissist does is about power, control, managing their image, narcissistic supply, and avoiding accountability. And as I go through these 3 ways, keep that checklist in mind, because if it makes that person's behavior make sense, putting it through that lens, that person is much more likely to be the abusive person. And also keep in mind, there can always be exceptions to any of the examples I'm about to tell you. And I'm going to give you a couple of the exceptions, but there can always be more. It is not a black and white list. Each situation needs to be taken individually. But the first way to spot the abuser in a couples counseling session is to look at who is the person that appears more dominant and in control? Who is the person that appears more confident and secure? Because the person that feels more confident and secure is usually the person that would be the abuser. Because someone who is in a trauma bond, they have been gaslit. They're told everything is their fault. They no longer trust themselves or their perception of reality, and they don't feel like they have any sense of self-worth anymore. And if anything, they're going to feel really low, and they might feel and look like they're very insecure. And this is not something to ignore. Now, there can also be a couple exceptions to this, though. One would be someone who is an addict. An addict might appear to be more anxious and insecure in a session, but the real clue would be how are they when they are under the influence. That's when the mask might come off, and that's when the abusive behaviors might come out. And then they're a terror. But in the actual session, they feel and look pretty calm and subdued, and they might seem more insecure and anxious, and the other person seems more dominant. Another exception to this would be with covert narcissists. Many covert narcissists, they appear to be more anxious, quiet, and subdued, but behind closed doors, when no one's looking, that's when the abusive side comes out. And in that case, the other person might appear to be more dominant in that case as well. This is why I say it is not going to be black and white. But remember the checklist. Everything they do is going to be about power, control, managing their image, narcissistic supply, and avoiding accountability. The second way to determine who the abusive person is to ask them both what can they do better in their life, or what can they do to improve the relationship. An abusive person is really going to struggle to answer this question genuinely. When it comes to answering what they can be doing better, there's not much they think they can be doing better. They think the problem is always somebody else. And that's another clue. Many abusers, they're constantly going to be blame shifting and or playing a victim routine. Now, the person that is the victim, they probably have a laundry list of things they can be doing better, and they know it because the abusive person has been constantly telling them what they want to be doing differently. Because the abusive person is constantly going to tell them what they're guilty of, they're constantly going to tell them what they can be doing better. The abusive person will often belittle what they wear, how they look, etc. These are all things to not ignore. But the person who is the victim, they know what they can be doing better, or at least they know what they're told they can be doing better, and they're more than likely to have tons of answers to this, and it's going to appear more genuine than the abusive person who is really going to struggle to answer that question. The third way to tell who the abusive person is to ask them about their conflicts at home. Ask them about their last disagreement and see how the situation is presented by both of them. Who is the person that is really more hell-bent on getting their way and having the control and the power in the dynamic? That person is way more likely to be the abuser. And who is the person that is jumping through the other person's hoops? Who is the person that appears to be trying to please the other person? That person is way more likely to be the victim in that situation. But again, don't confuse this and answering this question with being collaborative in the session, because sometimes in the session, the abusive person will not be collaborative, but other times, if it's a covert narcissist, they will appear to be collaborative because they're trying to be the perfect client. Also to note, sometimes victims will shut down, but this is not the same as not collaborating and being cooperative in the process. But when you ask them about the conflicts at home, keep that checklist in mind as well. Power, control, managing their image, narcissistic supply, and avoiding accountability. Because when you keep that in mind and you listen to how they talk about their conflicts, the truth is more than likely going to come to the surface. But those are the three ways that I suggest that a therapist can recognize who the abusive person is and who the victim is. There's also other resources like the Wheel of Power that you can take a look at that as well. But this is just the way I would do it and what I do when I'm listening to a couple talk about their issues. Because often the abusive person, they're usually not able to answer too many direct questions either. They're going to talk about things in left field, and sometimes their answers are just not going to make any sense. But to repeat the three ways, the first way is to see who appears to be more in control of themselves, who is more dominant, who appears to be more confident. But remember the two exceptions. If someone might be an addict, how they are under the influence can be completely different than how they are in the session. The other exception would be with a covert narcissist. They can be very abusive behind closed doors when their mask drops, but in the session, they might not appear that way at all. The second way to tell who the abusive person is to ask them both what can they be doing better in their life or how can they improve their relationship. The person who is able to answer that question more genuinely, often because the abusive person has been telling them over and over again what they can be doing better, the abusive person is really going to struggle to answer that question genuinely. The third way is to ask them about their conflicts at home and see who is trying to really get their way. Who is the person that is more hell-bent in being in control? And who is the person that looks like they're trying to jump through the other person's hoops? Who's the person that tries to be pleasing the other person? The person who is pleasing, more than likely the victim. The person who is more hell-bent on getting their way and being in control, more likely to be the abuser. And this is just a very rough way to do it. And again, if a couple is in front of me, I might even have different answers to it too if they're in front of me. But that's just a very general guideline on how I would do it. And with that, I thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video if you liked it. Please share this video with maybe a therapist or a counselor or anyone else that you think might benefit. And comment below your thoughts on what I had to say. And with that, thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.